and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the political developments happening in the country today, specifically, of course, with regards to the judiciary and the parliament and standoffs, with regards to the Supreme Court's earlier order regarding polls to be held in Punjab on the 14th of May. This is important, of course, because we've seen previously the parliamentarians also rejecting the Supreme Court's orders, claiming the fact that this is not the decision of the majority and they do not accept it. And then, of course, with the issues of the release of funds to be given for the ECP to conduct the polls, it's also important for the parliamentarians to come up with this discussion regarding the fact that the Supreme Court's orders is not something that is acceptable to the House, and therefore this is not something that is going to be conducted on the 14th of May with regards to security and financial challenges as well. A number of issues have been discussed in the Parliament today, with the Prime Minister also holding a meeting with the coalition partners with regards to negotiations with the opposition. Reports coming in that the JUIF chief is still not ready to accept conversation with the PTI chairman Imran Khan, and this is something that has also been reiterated by Ms. Mariam Aurangzeb. But with regards to the issues, of course, surrounding this particular negotiation is also the Supreme Court's directions for the political parties to indulge in such negotiations, which the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, while speaking after the Federal Cabinet meeting today, reiterated that is not the job of the courts. He mentioned, of course, that the arbitration aspect of what the courts have been talking about is not something that needs to be done by the judiciary, but in fact by the parliament, and it is upon the parliament to decide the course of action with regards to the elections, and then, of course, as to how the things will move with the political parties and their negotiations as well. It seemed that efforts were still underway to convince the JUIF chief, but we still don't know whether or not there has been any change in that decision. It seemed that the spokesperson from the JUIF claimed that this is not something that is acceptable to the party chief, and so a different course of action will be decided if the other coalition partners decide to go ahead with the discussion. There is also, of course, the hearing that is going to be resumed tomorrow after the court had given a deadline of the 26th of April, which was today, for the political parties to come up with a consensus regarding the date of polls. And so a lot needs to be discussed in terms of what is going to be the future stance by the political parties, and of course the action taken by the courts tomorrow. And at the same time, of course, the letter that is going to be sent by the National Assembly Speaker to the Chief Justice of Pakistan with regards to the sentiments of the House. Of course, the House has also earlier passed a resolution on the matter, but now plans to send a letter as well. This is going to be the focus of our discussion today. As always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined online by Rana Maqbool Ahmad, Senator PML-N, and Mr. Ali Rashid Leader PPP. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion today. Rana Saab, let me start with you. There have been, of course, numerous discussions of course, with regards to what the Parliament stance is. And this is, of course, not new in terms of what we have seen. The resolution earlier that was passed by the Parliament is also in line with the sentiments that have been discussed today. It seemed that the Supreme Court's order of holding the polls on the 14th of May has been rejected by the Parliament. But where we stand today in terms of legal and political terms, how exactly do you see the standoff evolving now in the future, particularly given the fact that the deadline of negotiations given by the Supreme Court has crossed today and the hearing is going to resume tomorrow?
Thank you, Star. My Islam, respect to Pitafi Saab and other young colleague. It's not a matter of sentiments only. It's an issue of law as well. Once the Parliament, with consensus or with majority, votes on some issue, it becomes a legal document. It cannot be outrightly rejected by anybody. If they say that the portion of or the amount which is already there in the consolidated fund, there is a legal procedure through which it can be drawn. It cannot be drawn by anybody's order. And National Assembly is fundamentally the custodian of that fund. So why are you pressing unnecessarily and ingenuinely a point which is not according to law? It has been sufficiently clarified by the legislature today, even by Law Minister and by Finance Minister, by other experts. Why are you pressing a point which is causing so much of commotion and convulsion and negative ramifications. We should rationalize things, we should be objective. And unfortunately, this is somehow or other such an inflexible position which should be reviewed. That is the answer to the question. Otherwise, system will get collapsed. Now they have taken a position, and if you have taken a position upward by a certain great law laureates and honorable judges, they must review their position. Uh, when there is a judgment by four senior judges vis-a-vis three, why are you insisting that it was not a judgment by four judges? What's the reason for that? Once
Right.
all the parties collectively was making a submission to the Honorable Supreme Court to form a bench, to constitute a full bench. So what was the hazard and what was the obstruction? What was the reason for that? Have you
Right, but
ever heard of any
Rana Sahab,
reason?
in terms of where we stand today, the Supreme Court has given its orders and now it's being rejected by the Parliament. So we're at a different point right now.
So now that is not Supreme Court. Supreme Court means all the judges of the court. You can't put forward three opinion of the three judges and you absolutely overlook the opinion of the judgment of the four judges. So then try to read between the lines and let's go for pragmatic analysis of the situation. So Supreme Court doesn't mean only three judges. Therefore, as far as the substance in the Supreme Court stance is concerned, all with all respect and regard, that doesn't carry much of weight and carry much of rationality. Therefore, this is to be reviewed. And once they were saying time and again that they are committed to the legal position and they have to take every step according to a law and the constitution, then why are they giving these extensions and why are they giving for panchayat, time for panchayat, etc.? This is not their job. So therefore, they are unfortunately compromising their position. They shouldn't do it. We are reaching almost a point of no return. We must review our positions. So I personally think if people say, can you imagine the repercussions of having elections in one province under caretaker's structure after 4 or 5 months when there are general elections and there is no caretaker set up in one or two provinces, how could the election be conducted?
Right.
Let's try to apply a mind and try to apply the principles of propriety.
Right,
Just
absolutely. And
slowly
Narasa, we'll talk more about that. But let me get into the discussion, Mr. Ali, as well. With regards to what we've been hearing coming in, reports coming in from the JUIF chief and the party, it seems that the stance of the JUIF is still that they do not want to negotiate with the PTI chairman Imran Khan. And I believe the PPP has been particularly also trying and making efforts to change that. There was a meeting of the coalition partners today as well. What sort of discussion was proceeded with, and in terms of the stance that the JUIF chief has, do you think there's any room for that to be changed and for negotiations to be held with the consent of all the coalition partners?
Thank you so much for having me on your show today. I believe that there is always room for discussion when it comes to these things. And you're absolutely right. Maulana Fazlur Rahman Saab is not too eager to sit with Mr. Khan, and rightly so. In the past, our experiences with Mr. Khan and his U-turns have not been the best. But that being said, Mr. Rahman is a old politician with a lot of experience, and he's flexible. Although he has his apprehensions and his reservations to negotiate with Mr. Khan, but we feel that in due time he will come around and he can be convinced, because I think it's in the collective interest of the nation and in Pakistan that we all the stakeholders should sit down and come to consensus on an election date, because legally speaking, when it comes to the legal points, my learned colleague was just explaining to you that legally there's a procedure to disperse funds to carry out elections, which cannot just be done within the next few days. And the the 90-day um, a limit of the election days has already been crossed, right? And there's a reason that you have 90 days to prepare, why the election commission is given 90 days to prepare, because it takes time. So if they're given the money right now, which by the way is 21 billion rupees, which I feel, in my personal opinion, Pakistan going through the austerity measures cannot afford, they won't be able to do it anyways. Technically, starting from now to 90 days, it will be October anyways. But by the time they'll be in a position to carry out the elections by the book legally, if you look at it, I think we should all sit together and come to consensus and you know and do, just have a way out and for yeah and yeah, that's it.
All right. And Farrukh, this is something that we've been hearing a lot, of course, with regards to what needs to happen or what should happen with political consensus. But again, as we've seen today, we haven't really reached that as yet even. And we heard the Prime Minister also speaking about the issues with regards to what the judiciary has been saying, and especially in terms of the role of arbitration that the PM has asserted is not the job of the judiciary. And we of course, have been seeing that assertion coming in from the courts for political parties to sit together. But how exactly will that benefit the situation, and whether or not the political parties can actually go ahead with it if there is pressure or any sort of stance coming in from the courts? Will that be of value?
Right, Sanam. I think we are living through this movie called Groundhog Day. Every day we keep on repeating what we have been experiencing for 25 years, right? Sadly, 20 years ago or 16 years ago, when we were talking about lawyers' movement, at that time, nobody would have thought that this day is going to come when the Supreme Court and the Parliament will be at loggerheads. And that is not all. I mean, look at the relativity of the principles when it comes to my honorable judges, right? But while I call them honorable, remember that most of them, especially who constitute this bench, are Nepo babies. Particularly, like, just ask yourself, Justice Munib Akhtar, would he have been on this bench had his father-in-law not been the former law minister? Or for that matter, if this Chief Justice's father was not a very senior bureaucrat? And how many times did it take for the CJ to actually qualify the exams of judgeship, right? All these things are open knowledge. I don't want to actually go into all these details. But my concern is that with, my society actually puts premium on things that are not competence, right? Because of that, of course, then this is exactly what is going to happen. People are going to overreach. They are going to actually try to install their own version of democracy in the country. For example, this talk about 90 days. I mean, of course, everyone respects law, everyone respects the constitution, and of course, the word of law says that elections have to take place in 90 days, except when it comes to Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, my honorable Supreme Court dozes off, right? When it comes to, 90 elections have to take place in 90 days, but I can haggle. I don't understand under which constitutional article does the Supreme Court appropriate the role of Indian matchmaker. In families, wedding, there are go-betweens. This is that kind of politics, honestly. I mean, this is literally shameful situation that we are in. And what am I going to say? I mean, 25 years ago when I started career, I had a lot of hope, a lot of expectations that we will take the country to some place, right? There would be some direction. But all we have been doing is revolving around the single point and repeating the same mistake. Karl Marx had said that history repeats itself, but first as a tragedy and then as a farce. Right now, we are living through the worst fast possible in our lives. So tomorrow, I'm not expecting any gracious attitude from the bench. We have seen how they have been behaving in the recent past. Their selective approach to law, their selective approach to circumstances are there. We have seen it. The way they have actually treated the security briefing. First, they refused to listen to the defense secretary. And then one day when they finally got through and when they met with the DGISI and various other senior office bearers, after that they appear on the bench next day and they tell you, regale you with the idea that why did the government actually not try to convince us? So the last thing possible at that time when you were refusing to allow this briefing to take place in your chamber was somebody to physically hold you and push you to actually accept this, right? That couldn't happen, that didn't happen. But what exactly are we actually driving at? But then we saw the in past 72 hours audio clips actually doing the circles, and after that everybody kept on saying that, oh look, the deep state is bugging. Nobody asked that one family was common in that conversation, right? Certain Khaja Sahab. And then he appears on television, actually in a vlog, and he owns that that talk as well. So don't you think there's politics being played? I tell you what politics is being played. Essentially, these three people are actually confronting, these 3 or 4 judges are confronting the very competent branch of the, or component of the Supreme Court. And because of that, because they are trying to actually play to one side of the gallery. They tried to play to the one side of gallery on April 9th last year, thinking that somebody, the new government will side with them. They did not, right? So now what they are trying to do is convince Imran Khan Sahab that we are your supporters. But the truth is they only want to appropriate, and they have very effectively appropriated a national crisis to settle their own scores within the bench. So if I'm astounded today when I was looking at television, all these senior people, symbols of hope for us or guidance, they actually behaving like teachers' pets. Because it was about CJ, and of course on in the books CJ's office actually commands a lot of authority.
Right.
Because of that, I mean, there's no hope. I keep on telling you, abandon all hope and just learn to live with whatever we have got. And this is exactly what I'm doing these days.
Right. Rana Sahab, with regards to the situation today, Farrukh has reiterated time and again the gravity of the situation and how he has no hope. But I want to understand where the political parties in the current political setup is standing and what foundation or hope are you counting on, especially when there is so much criticism with regards to the bench who will be hearing the same case that is being fought with regards to the elections tomorrow. How do you attach any value to this particular case if it's the same bench and you're, of course, criticizing its credibility? At the same time, there are responses being given from all sides as to how things are proceeding forward. So what happens tomorrow, is that something that matters to you and the political setup?
Unfortunately, I have to agree with Pitafi Sahab on this issue because the previous conduct is substantial proof not to go for genuine and real justice, because there's a terribly biased opinion about many things. And it will be miracle if they try to look at what has been happening and what are their views. And can they review their views or can they stick to the same thing? If they stick to the same thinking, then it's going to cause disaster to the system. But as far as this total quagmire is concerned, I personally think it cannot be discussed on media. There is some light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll be coming out of it. Obviously, common man and people like us, they get worried and concerned. They are genuinely concerned. But something will come up, and you will see the issue will be quelled and quashed for good. But unfortunately, why that opportunity and why this opportunity should be wasted and why that ordeal we reach. That there is nobody pressuring us to do it, and we are not carrying out our introspections, and especially at the upper level, the topmost level. I've already mentioned it too. It was such a simple affair that go for full bench. The issue would have been resolved because everybody was saying that we'll agree whatever the verdict of the full bench. So people don't understand the reason why it was not formed, why they were denied the right. It's the right of the people, right of the Pakistanis. They must request the Supreme Court, the Apex Court, that collectively they should put it in their wisdom and knowledge to give justice to people. But it was not done, unfortunately. So Sana, I personally think we pray to God, and we are worried, but I think something good will come out within a day or two.
All right. Mr. Ali, the decision, of course, by the coalition partners and the parliamentarians with regards to sending a letter through the National Assembly Speaker to the Chief Justice is important as well. But I want to understand what significance it would hold. We've seen previously a resolution coming in as well. The parliamentarians have quite openly spoken out with regards to the Supreme Court's order. It's of course still not being followed as was directed by the courts. What sort of an effect will this letter have, and why is it necessary?
Look, I think the reason it's necessary is because we feel that the Chief Justice should know the reasons for us not being able to do this. It's just not that outrightly we are rejecting the orders of the Supreme Court, but we do also have our legal perspectives and points which we want to highlight, and we want to bring it to the attention of the Chief Justice, and we want to document it, and we want to mention that this process is not legal, and if we are to disperse the finances to carry out these elections, it we'll have to over, we would have to bypass a legal procedure which is mandatory to disperse and to carry out these elections. And we are hopeful the Chief Justice will understand and maybe somehow review his decision. And and part of his decision was also that if the stakeholders and all these political parties can sit together and come to consensus, then he doesn't mind if the elections don't happen. So we are working on that front also. So that is the uh, that is the reason that we're writing a letter to the Chief Justice.
Right, but in terms of any legal value to the Supreme Court's order, neither the letter nor the resolution will hold any sort of legal effect. So it's only now the discretion of the Chief Justice whether or not he actually attaches any significance to it. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. I think if we think something is unlawful, and since he's the custodian of justice, we feel it is our moral, legal obligation to point out where we feel that some unjust um, something something unjust is happening. So we need to, at least whatever happens after that, at least we'll have clarity, and we'll feel that we did whatever we could to bring to the attention of the Chief Justice. These are the hurdles, these are the struggles, and these are the challenges in doing so, and what the law says. So we are hopeful that he will reconsider, reevaluate his decision, and will not take any drastic measures which will only cause more uncertainty and further uh, problems for the nation.
Right. All right, absolutely. Farrukh, with regards to this instance where we're still perhaps counting on an individual, the Chief Justice, to actually understand or realize what's going on and how the parliamentarians are rejecting something or what their stance is. It seems a bit confusing to me in terms of what we're expecting and what we really want. Is it that we want the Chief Justice to realize what is the right or legal course of action as the parliamentarians deem fit, or in terms of the consensus and the arbitration that is being also rejected as not something from the courts, we're still okay with the Chief Justice accepting the parliamentarians' decision because negotiations were held as directed by the court?
Right. I will take you back to that comic strip of Peanuts, right? Where Charlie Brown is actually trying to kick a ball, and Lucy actually keeps on removing the ball from in front of him, and he falls every time, and then he goes again. And people tell him, stop doing this because she's always going to do this, right? And he says, this time might be different. So this is the kind of hope that we keep on talking about. Again, another moment in our history, personal history as well. Sarah, let me take you back to 1 year ago, on 3rd of April, right? It had been exactly 1 month since my cardiac episode and my operation. And I was back at job, and we were doing this show again. There was special transmission going on because there was a vote of no confidence. And at that time, Imran Khan Sahab actually dissolved the assembly, or tried to. And you and I, because we were not getting many guests, a lot of burden because I'm the resident analyst actually came on me. I'm popping pills and I'm talking to you, and then I, not knowing which way the wind is going to blow. And of course, we are at the center of this fault line where everything happens, because PTV is a place where everybody thinks it is their responsibility to conquer and reconquer, right? And that time I kept on saying that I have full faith in Supreme Court because it was headed towards Supreme Court. And sadly, today I feel filthy that I kept on saying this because we didn't know such a kind of politics was being played there. Regarding this matter of letter, here's the problem. Pakistan's constitution has survived many attempts on its life, but it has actually not only come back, but it has come back as a patchwork quilt. Because dictators actually, this constitution, by the way, has the honor of having within it the name of one dictator, that was Zia-ul-Haq, who actually created a special amendment or some special change for himself, right? And because of that patchwork quilt, we keep on talking about this basic structure theory, and we keep on talking about this trichotomy of power in the country. But the fact is that those guardrails that should have ensured that a trichotomy of power, that executive remains in its own domain, judiciary remains in its own domain, and then parliament also does exactly the same. Those guardrails were never installed. The government of Pakistan recently and the parliament of Pakistan tried to install that guardrail by limiting or actually diffusing the powers of CJ and giving it to other members of the bench as well, of the Supreme Court, right? What became of that, right? So at this moment, it is a squatting match. It is a competition eyeball to eyeball. We have to see who blinks first. But Parliament is going to try to assert its own, authority, and they are going to come up with this idea of contempt of Parliament. And the Supreme Court, of course, has the right, or they think they have the privilege of actually taking up the matter of contempt of court. So what happens in the end? They both lose. Who wins? There are powers. I just mentioned one dictator. There's a reason why this country has had 4 military takeovers, right? And even when the military takeover was not there were gifts like General Bajwa who keep on giving, right? General Bajwa is gone, but why is it that 27th of April is important? I told you the other day that before retiring, General Bajwa did something which was very unique, that he actually promoted many major generals to lieutenant general, which was supposed to be the prerogative of the incoming army chief. There could be many reasons behind it, but because he did it, the army chief, it took longer than usual for the army chief to actually constitute his own team, right? This is usually what happens whenever army chief comes. He selects promotes many lieutenant generals, and then he actually forms his own team. So that team is going to be formed by the end of this month because many generals are retiring. So somehow it seems that people who are feeding these lines to the Supreme Court or Imran Khan Sahab or others have inhaled this propaganda that whatever has to be done within this window of time. Now, it saddens me, Sana, that Sri Lanka, had similar kind of economic problems, and of course, then there was interpodal pull between two forces, and we saw what became of Sri Lanka, right? Now we have even bigger cautionary tales. Look at Sudan, what is going on there. So I know that that won't happen in Pakistan, but my concern is that it was not for the lack of trying. That people who are actually playing all these games are essentially trying to bring about that kind of scenario.
Right.
So why should I forgive anybody who is totally destroying my dreams and my children's dreams, right? I brought up the issue of Nepo babies because in this country, nepotism sells. We know it through and through. Let me give you another example. There's a Tosha Khana case that was going on, right? All of a sudden, the judge was removed from there. Why? Because the Chief Justice of Lahore High Court, right, his son-in-law is used to be a senior minister in Pervez Elai's cabinet. And there is clear nepotism. I mean, there are telephone calls on record. With that kind of situation, you are going to tell me that I'm going to call it hunky-dory and I'm going to pretend it is about constitution, not about your own privilege, your own influences. I know as a person who didn't have any relative in the field, you must also know it as well, that we had to prove our competence every day in the last 25 years, every single day. That's why Groundhog Day. Our loyalty to the state, again, it should be a given, but we had to do it. And then our loyalty to the ascendant political order as well.
Right.
Without that, you could not survive. I mean, when on that date, 3rd of April last year, I was sitting here and I didn't know what exactly is going to become of that, or whether I will have another heart attack and I will, pass out on air. I was thinking, what kind of country does it to people that actually say that they love it, right? So this is the kind of state of affairs. Either you can choose a competent panel in the Supreme Court who are very clear about it, that they are going to restrict their limits, stay within their limits. I mean, you have listened to Qazi Faizisa's speeches.
Right.
Or then you can go to this clown show that is playing out in front of your eyes, which played out during Saqib Nisar, Iftikhar Chaudhary, and many others before that.
Right, absolutely. Rana Sahab, the concerns around the judiciary and the future, of course, of the parliament and the judiciary, both are important. Both the institutions are extremely important to us, of course. And for the constitution and democratic progress, we need to, of course, uphold the sanctity of both. But with what is happening right now, again, as Farrukh said, there are no clear winners out of the situation. But how will the current scenario, what the stance the parliamentarians are currently taking, also simultaneously protect the judiciary from disintegrating?
Whatever Pitafi Sahab has said, I think these are divine words by all means, because it was so full of truth and reality. This is great food for thought for everybody, the Chief Justice of Supreme Court and the parliamentarian, every countryman. That is the issue, that's the challenge for the country. But today, there is a way out. If Chief Justice, Honorable Chief Justice goes for little analysis and introspection, there is another opportunity to save the grace of the Supreme Court. I will insist saying this. This is not issue of Supreme Court vis-a-vis the Parliament. This is issue vis-a-vis 3 honorable judges vis-a-vis the parliament. Why should we try to go for criticizing or talking against the other honorable judges who are so truthful, who were so pure, like Atramanilla and others? They are not party to it. So we should not put them together. But all the same, they're also very honorable three judges. They must reconsider. Today, a letter has been sent by the Speaker to the Honorable Chief Justice. This letter graciously, if Supreme Court Chief Justice converts into a petition and refers it to the full bench, and full bench starts hearing this case. And meanwhile, the already given order that can be revisited, and it can be subject of the full bench analysis and judicial appraisal. So issue will be largely addressed and quelled. This opportunity should not be missed by the Honorable Supreme Court. I personally think Parliament is the winner now today. They are on the right. They are pressing a point which is supporting the propriety and service to the nation. The other issue, if they go for that, it will cause a lot of fragmentation in the nation. Maybe it turns into bloodshed in the community, because holding elections in one province with caretaker and then holding elections, general elections, in one province with full government and other provinces and the National Assembly with caretaker, there will be clashes. It will be very uneven. It will be very unreasonable. For all practical purposes, this is not a suitable step. It's not in the interest of the nation. I personally think the Honorable Chief Justice and three judges should consider this submission of mine and of the Parliament. This is a great opportunity to silence this issue, which has become almost volcanic, and it's so disastrous for the country. So this is my submission is. This can
Right,
be the solution to the problem.
absolutely. Mr. Ali, of course, with regards to the issue of the jurisdictions of the institutions being crossed, and with the judiciary interfering in political matters, we've been hearing such rhetoric coming in for other institutions as well, and it's always something that is not in favor of the democratic process or for the progress of the country. And we, of course, want the institutions to respect the jurisdictions. But in terms of where we stand today, it seems that perhaps there is some sort of momentum towards establishing those boundaries once again. But how do we move forward with the Parliament, of course, with it reiterating its stance at the moment, but also at the same time with the kind of rift that we've seen within the judiciary as well, and the inclinations of political parties to go towards the courts in terms of all of this chaos? Do you think that after this episode ends, there will be some change in that sort of inclination?
Look, I think, in my opinion, it's already May is around the corner, and normal elections by the time are due in October as it is. And I think in this entire process, I think all the institutions, the parliament, the judges, etc., even the army came out, the DGISPR came and said, we are apolitical and we don't want to be part of any. We don't want to seem like we are siding with any political party. So I guess this what I'm glad, although this is not a good situation at all, but at least everything is being followed by process and procedure. If the Chief Justice passed a verdict, and if the Parliament does feels that it cannot make it happen, the Election Commission also thinks it cannot happen because the 90-day limit has been crossed as it is. At least we are on track. At least a letter is being written from the National Assembly Speaker to the Chief Justice. It may not bear fruit or whatever, but at least every institution is working systematically. And in my opinion, by the time the dust settles, it will be time for general elections as it is, and everything will happen as it should be happening all together at the same rate.
All right. Farrukh, I know you've said this before that there is no hope, but in terms of how things are evolving, do you see any possible good coming out of it?
Yeah, thank you very much for that very great, really great question. Well, when I say abandon all hope, I don't mean that there won't be any hope for anybody at all. But
Just not for you?
somebody who was dying, somebody asked him, when is the end of time going to come? He said, for me, it has come already. So people like me, you know, the biggest problem that we have actually faced is that somehow we had this dictatorship of boomers, right? After boomers generation X, my generation actually fell through the cracks. Then generation Y or millennials, right? I assume your generation, or if you're not generation Z, you know,
I'm not Gen Z.
Okay, they were also you know, subjected to the same kind of torments. Right now, all your leaders are either 60 or 60 plus, right? This is moment of truth for the entire country. No Gen Xer is the national leader. Well, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is Gen Z, but we don't know how much time does it take to become the prime minister. But then the only hope was that we can do something for the generation Z, and that is, I mean, my children are also Gen Z. But sadly, it seems that we are failing on so many levels, Sana, that we cannot create. Look at what is happening in your neighborhood. Don't look at Afghanistan, I'm sorry, but that is not a great place to look at, right? Look at India, look at China, right? Even Iran, their internal economics and politics notwithstanding, they still are actually building up to something. And what are we doing to ourselves? All these petty politics, right? All this politics is actually self-effacing, and it is damaging. So I agree with Ali Rashid that after all this song and dance is over, eventually October would have arrived and we would be actually holding elections on time. But whatever we have to go through,
Yeah.
I mean, especially those who are sitting in the parliament, who are sitting in the Supreme Court, who are chief bureaucrats, they all are kind of part of the elite, right? The common man or common woman, right, like you and I, we are going to suffer. And the common man on the street is suffering even
Already,
now.
of course.
I mean, atta queues that are there. In 21st century, third decade of the 21st century, there are atta queues in this country. I mean, this should be shameful for any nation. And what have we done? We are just celebrating, okay, we can do something about it.
Right.
With all that said and done, I know that in you and in me, there is an incorrigible optimist. Mine might be buried deep, but honestly, we can dig that person out. But right now, I mean, the elite is behaving in such a bad manner that I don't even want to have any hope. Very
Right.
quickly, I know twice you have said
Yes.
right and you want to conclude the program. But what lessons am I learning these days? I mean, if you run out of the country and you sit in a Western country and you know, start berating your own state, right? Whatever is happening on vlogs, you can get away with it. So why shouldn't I do that? When I go abroad, I assure you that I will be better protected than all these people. Their states will be protecting me rather than the way they are actually hiding in plain sight, these guys, right? Who are supporting PDA or anarchy in the country. So why shouldn't I do that? I will do it. And you haven't met a bigger troll than I. So you'll see what happens then.
Absolutely, I know that. Thank you, Farrukh, for those
You know
words.
that.
Yes, and thank you very much, Rana, Maqbool, Ahmad Saab, for joining us, and thank you, Mr. Ali Rashid, for being a part of the discussion as well. Of course, there is a lot of question marks with regards to what's going to happen today, a lot of uncertainty in terms of our political dynamics, and as Farrukh said, perhaps very little hope, but there might be some for us to hold on to, and that's what we're going to do tonight at least. That's all we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.